Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Is It Time to Lower the Voting Age in America? I am so excited to be moderating this discussion with these wonderful folks beside me. Thank you, Andrew, for a wonderful presentation this morning. It definitely is a setup for what we're talking about right now. And so my name is Tiffany Brooks. I am the organizing manager for students and youth at the Children's Defense Fund. And just because I love authenticity, I'm going to have them introduce themselves in the way that's most authentic to them. I could do it, but I don't think that's fair. Yeah? So, to the person left to me.
Good morning, everybody. How you doing? That's what I like to hear. My name is Wisdom Cole, and I proudly serve as a National Director for Youth and College at the NAACP. I've been with the NAACP for a little bit over 5 years, originally starting as an organizing training campaign manager, and then working my way up to National Director. Primarily, the focus that I do within the NAACP is really about turning out young people to vote, really recognizing that young voters, black voters, are issue-based voters, and so making sure that they understand issue-based campaigns, trainings. Primarily what we've been working on at the NAACP is this fight to cancel student debt. Raise your hand if you have student debt.
Had it.
Look, had it and still got plenty of it.
I've given my over to the Lord.
And so we're still actively working to cancel that, actively working to make sure that we see that elimination. I probably also serve as a negotiator in the negotiating rulemaking session to determine how we use the Higher Education Act to cancel student debt. And so we are using issue-based learning, issue-based campaigns to ensure that we turn out young black youth. Excited for this conversation.
Wonderful. Joy to be with you all today. My name is Andrew Wilkes. I work at Generation Citizen, which is a national civics education organization, as the Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer, and in that capacity help to lead our policy around coalition building, legislative and administrative advocacy for civic engagement, and also lead an initiative called Vote 16 USA, which is relevant to the subject of the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Well, good morning. Sorry. My name is Shepard. I am a senior psychology student at North Carolina A&T, so being in Bison territory is a bit foreign to me, but I do love it here, and I'm really excited to speak on this panel, and I really want to thank you guys for joining me, or for me joining y'all, I should say, and then y'all as well. I don't really know what else to say, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everyone. So I met some of you this morning in the opening session. I'm Adam Benforado. I'm a law professor at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And my area of expertise is children's rights. And I have a new book called A Minor Revolution, How Prioritizing Kids Benefits Us All. And one of the core messages of that book is we need to let kids vote. And so I was so excited to get to be on this panel. And I hope, I sometimes wonder if I'm going to get people who are already true believers in this room. And I'm hoping that we have some skeptics, because I think by the end, we're going to convince you all to come on board. So thank you all for coming out.
Awesome, thank you. I've given my student loans personally over to the Lord, and so I know they exist, but Jesus paid it all. Thank you, amen. Anyway, so let's start off with the question that everyone in the audience wants to know. Why should we lower the voting age in America, and what would be the benefits of doing so? And anyone can start, or you can raise your hand and I'll just point to you.
I can start off. Okay, perfect. So I was actually, again, like I said, I'm new to Bison territory, and I was hanging out with a couple friends yesterday, and I was explaining to someone why I was at Howard, and I told them, oh, I'm here to explain why we should lower the voting age, and she was like, she's on the debate team here, and she was like, wait, so like, why should we lower the voting age? And I kind of just got on my soapbox about how we're kind of in this area, well, we've been in this area where, as a country, where there are young people who are being told what they have to do with their bodies, right? And a lot of the time they're like being told that no matter what happens to you, you have to have the baby or you have to do X, Y, and Z, you know? And then if you look at the other side of that, we're also being told, or not we're being told, there are older people who kind of don't get the back end of the things that we're coming up with. And what I mean by that is, so 16-year-old versus 60-year-old, right? 16-year-old gets pregnant and now they're told they have to have a baby no matter what happens to them. 60-year-old doesn't really have, like, they can't have a kid, you know, things happen. And they're the main ones in like office saying this is what has to happen no matter what. And then we kind of end up on this like ground of, okay, there are these older individuals telling young individuals what they have to do with their bodies. And young individuals a lot of the time are, not to say hip, because that makes me sound a little dated, but you know, hip. And they kind of know what's going on in the world, and older people get complacent in the things that they know. And so the reason why I feel like younger people should be able to vote is because they're hip. They're hip. They know what's going on, you know? They know the good, the bad, and the ugly, and so do the older people. But I think when it comes to the younger people, you know, I'm a little younger, but love y'all all. You know, love y'all. We were kind of given this world in a state of ugliness, and as of right now, our job is to make it better. And it's a little hard, but that's what our job is, and that's what we're trying to do. And I feel like we got this. Like, yeah, sorry. Nothing. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Happy to lean in a bit on this, and I want to build off your comments. I'm a proud Hampton University alum, and so I'm getting accustomed to being in Bison territory as well. So thank you for clearing the pathway to say that kind of remark. A couple of arguments are often made by youth activists themselves and by their adult allies in terms of why we should lower the voting age. One of the arguments that's often made in more politically conservative areas is a kind of there should be no taxation without representation argument. And so at 16 is an age where most young folks are able to legally work. And if you're having taxes on your paycheck, you ought to be able to participate in the decision-making of a society where you're also participating economically. The second case, which is one that Representative Ayanna Pressley made when she introduced an amendment to the For the People Act in 2021, is that young folks have a direct stake in many of the issues that are of greatest import in our society, whether we're talking about gun violence that's happening in schools, or whether we're talking about issues like climate change, access to mental health that's identity affirming and provided as a matter of right, to Adam's comments earlier. You ought to be able to have voice and power to push your issues forward. So those are two of some of the most commonly cited arguments.
I just wanted to cite that he was saying that he went to the real HU, so, you know, that's passively. But I wholeheartedly agree, you know, the Ayanna Pressley model of how can there be decisions made about young people without young people, right? These things are impacting them each and every single day, and so it's important that they have a stake in that claim, that they have a voice in that space. Again, I talk about our membership at the NAACP Youth in College. Primarily, we are serving folks who are under the age of 18 and equipping them with tools around civic engagement. And so oftentimes we run campaigns called Vote for Me, right? Because I can't vote, I need you to vote for me. I need to talk to my uncles, my aunties, my brothers, my sisters, the folks down the block to make sure that they also understand that their voice impacts me, right? I think back to 2020 and some of the work that I was doing around the census and recognizing how the census impacts the next 10 years of our country. That means it's impacting people who are even yet to be born, right? People who are going to be impacted by the decisions that we make. And so how are we working to create a more inclusive democracy where everybody's able to participate and those who are impacted by the decisions in real time can voice those concerns.
Thank you, Andrew.
So, I really would echo everything that's already been said. But oftentimes when I'm confronted with this question, why should children get to vote? I like to flip it around. And I say, a core principle in this nation is one person, one vote. You tell me why children shouldn't be able to vote. Just like you had to tell me why black people couldn't vote and why women couldn't vote. And when we flip it around, I think we start to see, right, how things really start to break down. So the big pushback, and I talk to people across the political spectrum, I talk to young people, I talk to old people. The most common pushback that I get when I flip it around is, they just don't have the capacity. And I say, well, one of my areas is psychology and law. And guess what? We've actually, cognitive psychologists have run studies on voting relevant cognition. And in the voting booth, when we're talking about the cold cognition, not the hot cognition, when you're in the heat of the moment and your peers are in the car and you're deciding how fast to drive, but the cold cognition moment of choosing who president should be. There is no difference between the average 16-year-old and the average adult. But in the United States, we let many, many adults who are not average, who are well below average, vote. No questions asked. And so the better question to ask is, well, what does it take to take an adult's vote away? And I will tell you, right, for incapacity, right, someone who's suffering from dementia, we tend to actually do an individualized determination. And the fact that someone has trouble putting their clothes on doesn't mean they don't get to vote. If you understand what voting is, like what the process is in general, you continue to get to vote. And I think one of the really funny things often that I hear from someone is, this is a very sophisticated, picking the president, a very sophisticated thing. 14-year-old can't do that. And I'm like, the next election is going to be Trump versus Biden. A 14-year-old makes an easier decision on what breakfast cereal he should have in the morning. Now, the second pushback I usually get is, well, okay, maybe I'll look into that psychology research that you mentioned. I'll think a little bit more on that. But at the end of the day, kids just don't have relevant experiences. And as everyone on this panel has pointed out, kids do have relevant experiences. And they are experiencing, one of the reasons I think we have such a mental health crisis in this country is because adults have created a mess, are failing to clean up that mess that deeply affects kids, and tell kids, you can't fix it yourself. All you can do is protest. And if you protest, guess what? We're going to disparage you. Look at what happened to the Black Lives Matter kids who came out. Look at what happened to the Parkland kids who came out in the media. These are everyday kids. They weren't seeking the spotlight. They were forced to do that, and the only thing they could do was protest. And so I think that's why we're on the stage. They need power to change the world to their benefit.
Thank you all. And I wanted to add to what you said, Andrew, and you mentioned it earlier in your presentation. What I most appreciate is how you've also discussed the cognitive functioning of where children are in each stage, right? Which I think is super important and super important to hint on, because I think oftentimes too, when we have these discussions, people always try to separate science from politics, from religion, et cetera, when science is in everything that we do. And so having that information is also super important because you can do a comparative analysis as well, right? Fair to say. So you can look at the cognitive functioning of students and you can look at the cognitive functioning of some of the adults, right? And you can do comparative analysis there, right? So like when you stated earlier that there are some humans, some adult people that are less than average, making decisions and you do that comparative analysis, what I found when I was teaching is that some of my students, because they think from a more simplistic viewpoint, some of them have the most clearest understanding of what's happening versus adults who've taken in these experiences and have, developed their own thinking and thought processes over time. But what I appreciate about children is that they can take the most simple things and just lay it out to you flat. So if they don't like what's happening, they will let you know. And if you've ever been a teacher, you know that. They come in there telling everybody's business. But if they don't like something, and when you give them the agency to let you know they don't like something, I don't like that. And it forces you to make a shift. And so how dare we say that the most honest of persons is not someone who is capable of making a decision about the future of America, or even something as simplistic as who's going to be the next president.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add a quick thing, which is we think, right, kids are not capable of thinking about complex subjects. And I just want to give you one little, I have a 9-year-old. We live, public school in Philadelphia, the closest, little sort of historical site is Eastern State Penitentiary, right? The first penitentiary in the United States. And so public schools in Philadelphia, strapped for cash. This is the first time that she gets to go on a field trip. My daughter, so she's 7 years old, goes in to this. They take her into a cell, bursts out crying, inconsolable. We do this to people. We block people in a box for years and years. And I thought, that's my daughter, right, who would cry seeing what we do to people. But you think about, well, why shouldn't she get to vote on mass incarceration? She has real feelings, and guess what? They're the right feelings. That is, we should be appalled. And sometimes as we get to be older, we actually just get used to all this. We get used to all the injustice. We think we can't change it. And it takes a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old to say, this is clearly wrong, and we can do something different about it. See, look at me. I'm getting teared up. Just thinking about my daughter tearing up.
Go on and cry, Adam. It's okay. It's a safe space. But that speaks to what Troy mentioned earlier about complacency and how people get complacent and just used to it. And sometimes people get hopeless and they think it can't change. So to move us along, Andrew, this question is for you. What is the conversation happening across the country as it relates to lowering the voting age, and what is the current landscape?
Yeah, really appreciate that question. So maybe just to set a bit of context for the conversation and the landscape at once. Lowering the voting age is something that is increasingly happening all around us, particularly nearby. So in Maryland, beginning with Tacoma Park in 2013, residents, including 16 and 17-year-olds, elected to lower the voting age to 16. That was the first city in the country to make that decision. This fall, Rockville, Maryland, a town of about 70,000 folks, has a ballot question to lower the voting age to 16. So it's already happening around us. Oakland and Berkeley have also elected for school board elections only to lower the voting age to 16, and have run into a few implementation challenges. Oakland appears poised to implement the measure in 2024. And we've also seen multiple rounds in larger metropolitan areas. San Francisco had a ballot question in 2016, and then again in 2020 that we worked pretty closely with some youth activists and adult allies on. DC has also run a campaign in 2018 and is gearing up. Black Swan Academy and DC Action for Kids is planning to lead that charge, along with a deep high school voter registration effort that Black Swan Academy is leading in all 40 high schools across Washington, D.C. So right now, the current conversation and landscape is intergenerational coalitions of young folks demanding the right to participate politically in our democracy, which I think is an encouraging sign at a moment where the narrative is often, and to some extent the data substantiates this, declining trust and declining confidence in our public institutions for understandable reasons. Insurrections, surgical voter suppression happening in ways that judges have attested to. Young folks are showing what it looks like to, I want to build on Adam's points, pair protest with a desire to participate in formal ways through voting. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning in terms of the conversation and the landscape is the importance of talking about lowering the voting age, not solely as a matter of strengthening civic engagement, but as a matter of strengthening racial equity and racial justice. And folks in New Jersey, I think, are really leading the way in that effort. Vote 16 New Jersey is a youth-led coalition of folks that are pushing in Newark, particularly, but also in Jersey City, to lower the voting age. And so I think it's important to highlight, this is the last thing I'll say on this front. There's been some research done showing that older populations of voters, older demographics of voters, the more seasoned voters, maybe I'll put it that way, seasoned saints, I hear you, Tiffany, tend to vote against more generous, equitable school spending, whereas younger voters in the electorate tend to vote for more, better textbooks, more teacher professional development, more innovative project-based curriculum, all of those sorts of things that can be associated with deeper public school funding. And so a part of the case for lowering the voting age, and a part of the case specifically that folks are making in New Jersey and elsewhere, is that if you enfranchise younger voters, you not only have more racial justice, but you have also more educational justice, so that districts that have traditionally been institutionally underserved and starved of the resources that they deserve can have more funding when voters, younger voters, demand the things that they are entitled to.
Thank you, Andrew. And so earlier you mentioned in your comments talking about the racial aspects of it, right? And we know that voting is very layered and demographics matter, right? Demographics are super important, even though sometimes we don't want to dig deep into the data. And so for you, Wisdom, my question is, you're fighting to combat voter suppression across the country and to eliminate the barriers that we, especially Black and brown communities, are experiencing as they go to cast a ballot. How would lowering the voter age help with tackling this crucial issue?
Yeah, you know, I think very much in numbers. When I first moved to DC, somebody told me that elections aren't won by what campaign has the most amount of money. Elections are won by the number of doors that you knock on, right? The number of relationships you have, the number of people that you are able to galvanize and build through relational organizing models. The NAACP has really worked to develop strategic campaigns where we are doing what Black folks have been doing for centuries, right? Working through our relationships, working through our communities. We've been asking people to engage in the Power of Five. What does it mean for you to turn out your neighbors? What does it mean for you to turn out the people in your dorms? What does it mean for you to turn out the people that you see each and every single day at the grocery store? And so when we talk about lowering the voting age, that's also bringing in a new population of voters to participate. Oftentimes when we think about our work in youth and college, we think about the next generation of voters, right? I love the fact that we have folks who are already engaged, who are doing amazing work. There's been some research that's actually come out lately about how when young people have a political home, right, an organization they identify with, they are more likely to vote. We are consistently putting out information about knowing your polling location. We are consistently providing tools for folks to do digital voter registration, do digital canvassing. And so when we talk about lowering the age, that means that we are including a whole new subset of young people in that process, for them to vocalize their feelings, their emotions, for them to educate their population. You know, some of the fiercest warriors for social justice and some of the fiercest people I've seen who want to be civically engaged are young people between the ages of 16 and 18, right? You remember during, I think this was like right before the pandemic had started, there was a young 16-year-old who was registering voters at Popeyes when they were having those sandwiches, right? Right?
Yes, go where the people are.
You got to be strategic. You got to be creative. You got to be innovative, right? We're no longer, and I would even argue we never really were, in a generation where you could just tell people, go vote to go vote, right? You know, even go vote because our ancestors voted, right, or needed to vote. It's really about the issues, right? The issues that are important to our lives. How are we increasing funding in our schools? How are we ensuring, and this is the one that's the issue that's really important to me, how are we fighting for free college education, right? If we believe education is a fundamental right in America, higher education should be free, right? But that happens when younger people are able to participate in that conversation, when they're able to speak to their real life experiences and add there. Oftentimes what I think about when, and I really quickly want to shout out one of our young leaders who was a graduate of Howard University in the building, Channing Hill, in the back right there. Say what's up, Channing. Right. When young people have a seat at the table, right? I think about the young people I get to interact with each and every single day. These are the people who are going to be the future lawyers, the future doctors, the future policy writers, the future policy makers in America. And so when we give them that platform to start at an earlier age, think how fierce, think how strong they are when they get into those positions of power, right? Our job as advocates, as warriors for social justice, is to ensure that they are prepared to take on those challenges. And the earlier they're able to do that, the better they're able to become.
Awesome, thank you. And so in light of that last question, I'm gonna go off script a little bit. So we have these conversations, and back to my thoughts about the layers. When I was working at Anacostia Senior High School in Ward 8 of DC, there were students who could care less about anything we're talking about, right? Because these conversations don't typically include them, right? We include students, but we typically include a certain subset of students, right? There are students that don't want to be lawyers. There are students that don't want to be future activists. There are students that just want to thrive and survive in the community that their entire family has grown up in and don't care because they consistently see it crumbling down, right? So I've had students that have never visited the monuments but live about 2 train stops away, but will never leave Anacostia, the Anacostia area, right? And so while these conversations are great to talk to college students and students who we know are going to college, how do we get the other subset of students who could care less to be engaged and involved, right? Because education, college is not the pipeline for everyone. Some want to go to trade school. Some want to become the next supervisor at Safeway, and that is their right. Because people, our young people should have choice and agency, right? And so how do we get those students to care, that youth to care?
I want to, something that's been recurring on my mind, and it actually I feel like is a good answer, is to listen. Like, listen to these kids. I feel like being someone who is a newfound or coming into their adulthood, one thing that I really wish I could have had more of in my childhood was like if people just listen. Like, my dad was one of those people that he said, I don't care what you do, but you're gonna be busy. And it wasn't of I don't care what you do, it was more so like you're gonna do sports or you're gonna do something that like I want you to do, you know? And it wasn't until I like found a passion for music and my music teacher was like, oh, he's really good at music, you should just let him do music. And where he was like, okay, I'll finally let you do something that you want to do. And I think it ties into the conversation of where children don't have autonomy, like at all. Every day you wake up Monday through Sunday and you're told what you're gonna do, where you're gonna be, what you're gonna wear, until you're, maybe if you're in high school, because I found out people actually wear uniforms in high school. I grew up in public school, so I didn't. But the recurring theme is that we're constantly telling these kids what they have to do all the time, and they do not get to make decisions by themselves. And it wasn't until I got to college where I had to start making my own meals and like getting my clothes prepared and stuff like that. And I was wondering why I was having such a hard time with these issues, like with these things that everybody does every day, day in and day out. And it's because up until I turned 18, I was not making those decisions for myself. And so when you're growing up and you're going to school, people are going to slip through the cracks because, yeah, like if you're being told what to do day in and day out, you're really gonna stop caring what is going on around you because you're being told what's going on around you, or you're being told what to do. Actually, one of the things that was in the briefing for the conversation was what's going to stop kids from like just voting the way their parents do. And like the plain answer to that is honestly like nothing, because kids are told what they're going to do by their parents. You spend most of your time with your parents all the time, like, so you have to start listening to them and amplifying their voices. If a kid wakes up one day and they're like, oh, I don't really want to go to art class, I don't like art, I've heard parents say, oh, well, you're going to go anyway. And that's not the answer to that. The answer to you don't like art is, okay, you don't like art, so what do you like? What do you want to do? What do you want to get into, you know? I think making sure that everyone is heard, because that's, at the end of the day, that's all we want to be, is heard. Humans want to be heard. Mm-hmm. And I think that if kids were given the opportunity or given the platform to like base their concerns or their opportunities, like we said, they're very blunt. They will tell you what they like and what they don't like, or if they're uncomfortable, if they're comfortable. And I think the issue with adults, and sometimes I even do this, like I mentor around the college that I go to, and I can get complacent in, okay, well, you know, you had a bad day, but, you know, it's just, we get so complacent, and like I said before, the issue is complacency, and we have to be able to amplify what their concerns are or what their issues are, and give into what they do like. You know, if they say, oh, I like bananas, you know, nah, give them a banana. You know, it's so simple, and I don't want to simplify it, but when it comes to kids, it really can be so easy because we brought them here. None of us asked to be on this earth, you know? We were all kids once. We are children of somebody. And so I think sharing that, like understanding that y'all were once in their position and realizing what you could be, the person that you wanted to be, or be the person that you needed when you were their age or when you were in their position. I'll pass.
Thank you, Troy.
A couple things. I want to definitely affirm what you're saying in terms of the importance of autonomy. And I think it's critical for us to build with and build from what students say they care about and what young people say they care about. So a part of what Generation Citizen does in addition to lowering the voting age is what we call community-based action civics. And it's a form of project-based civics where students don't learn about democracy and citizenship by rote memorization or, you know, document analysis of the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, or so forth. Even though occasionally you'll find some gems in there, that's not what real vibrant democracy is about. It's about, in a project-based civics pedagogy, it's about students selecting the issues that they care about and therefore then want to contact their elected officials, their appointed officials, and relevant agencies. So we work in about 8 states across the country with about 25,000 students. And the 2 or 3 issues that we see the most often are issues around mental health, issues around gun violence prevention, issues around public safety. And so when we organize from issues like those that students say they care about, I think it helps us to appeal not only to those who want, to your point, Tiffany, to be activists or envision themselves in careers of public service, but working from things that they see and have concerns about in their everyday school environment, in their community. The second thing, which is related to a part of why I think we see public safety and gun violence prevention as often selected issues, particularly among high schoolers, but to some extent among middle schoolers, is we experience a lot of what the social science, specifically political science literature calls civic disjuncture. And what civic disjuncture means in this context is if your first experience of government as Black and brown students in particular is that you're disproportionately at risk of suspension, of expulsion, of harsh classroom management strategies, it doesn't incline you to view government and participation as something that values you, that sees you as a stakeholder who belongs, who can participate. And so if your first experience of school is carceral, how can it be something that you associate as a constructive space of citizenship. So a part of where I think we can go is to talk about disrupting school to prison pipelines and instead co-creating school to public square pipelines. Meaning that if schools are less carceral and more democratic spaces in embryo, then we can make a better pitch for democracy. If you don't experience anti-democracy in school, and then we say, hey, there's this thing outside of school that looks a lot better than what you're experiencing in here, we can have more congruency between schools and what's happening in communities.
Thank you.
I wanted to build off of that because the question I get asked oftentimes is why are young people so apathetic to voting, right? Why are young people not engaged in the system? We often talk about, some of the first time that young people are engaged around civic engagement is when they're going to college, right? I remember my first day in college, moving in, going to my dorm, somebody passing me a voter registration form and saying, hey, are you registered to vote? And me engaging for the first time. We talk about with our young people, vote like it's your first time. And we know, right, the research that when young people consistently vote from the age of 18 forward, they are consistently to be high propensity or lifelong voters. And so even thinking about the folks who are not engaged in that system, right? I think about the Black community and thinking about young people who are not going into institutions of higher education. Where are they getting that civic knowledge? Where are they getting that civic engagement? Where are people asking them to get engaged? And to the point that you were bringing up, right? One of the reasons why young people are not voting is because look at the people who are in these positions of power, right? We have elected officials who steal, who cheat, who lie, and that is the consistent inundation of information that we're getting, right? That we can go turn out. We can go do our job. We can go vote for the person who is in our best interest, but they can steal an election and get away with it over and over and over again. And so if we are increasing pipelines or pathways, it's not just about being at the college campuses. Honestly, it's not even just about being at the high school campuses. It's really about making sure that we are getting into the community. I really see voting as a family affair. If you are discussing upcoming elections, if you are discussing what's on the ballot at the dinner table, if you are taking, and I think this is how we start to build these pathways, we have to take young people to the polls on election day, right? We have to fill out our ballots with our children around the dinner table. We have to make sure that folks understand how intertwined these issues are to our lived reality, because it's not even about the president or Congress, but it's about some of these local ballot initiatives and people who are elected in our cities, in our states, that will affect us the very next day.
Thank you so much. And so I want to acknowledge, one, meeting them where they are, right? That's what came up as a theme. And then I also want to acknowledge our youth and young adults who have different forms of guardianship, because it's also important to acknowledge that everyone doesn't grow up with their biological parents. And so that's included in the dialogue as well, right? There's different forms of guardianship and mentorship and those who they engage with on a regular day-to-day basis. And so thank you all so much. And so Adam, in your book, A Minor Revolution, How Prioritizing Kids Help Us All, you discuss how we deny young people any political power. I'm trying to save paper, so it's a back and forth situation. Give me a few seconds to turn the page over. People, any political power, thank you, to the detriment of our country, and how disregarding the rights of children is not just a moral problem, but a social and economic problem as well. How would lowering the voting age help to move our country in the right direction for rectifying these problems? And I'm gonna adjust this a little bit, because we talked a lot about the social aspects, but can you point to the economic aspects of it?
Well, I think that in the book, people often ask me, you identify these various rights, which is the most important one? People always want to know, what's number one? And I think this is number one. And the reason is, I think if we leave it to adults to give children power, if we leave it to adults to address children's rights, it's going to take a lot longer. I'm an optimist, so I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but it's going to take a lot longer. And actually, I pulled up a quote from Susan B. Anthony that I wanted to bring in here, and this is the quote. "The moment you deprive a person of his right to a voice in the government, you degrade him from the status of a citizen of the republic to that of a subject, a person helpless, powerless, bound to obey laws made by superiors." And so I really see, we talk about gateway drugs. Well, I think this is the gateway drug to what ails America. You give kids the vote, and I think suddenly we start to see movement on all of these other things. Why does so much of the federal budget go to old people and so little, less than 10% of the federal budget goes to children? Why is that? Kids can't vote. It's as simple as that. Why? In Philadelphia, my kid's public school, why was it shut down half days for the first week of school this year? My kindergartners, first week, half days every day. Because if it gets above 90 degrees, my children's elementary school doesn't have adequate air conditioning. In 2023, in the United States of America, you have to shut it because it's hot. Why is that? Kids don't have power. I talked to an 11-year-old when I was writing this book, and he, unprompted, he was asking me about some of the other subjects. I wasn't actually talking about voting. He was like, "What else are you writing about in this book?" And I said, "Oh, lowering the voting age." And he said, "Yeah, it's really funny. I was thinking about this the other day. My family, we have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, my sister, and we have 2 parents, and our next-door neighbors are in their 70s. And my family gets 2 votes. We have 4 people, we have 2 votes. My next-door neighbors have 2 votes. They have 2 people, 2 votes. Just do the math on anything that matters to kids. But here's the thing. As I said in my presentation before, right? Prioritizing kids leads to good policy for all of us. The research is so clear. For the future of Philadelphia, invest in public schools. Make every school a good school, and that is a strong Philadelphia in 20, 30, 40 years. So in some ways, we're dooming ourselves. When we focus, right, on denying kids, we're actually setting ourselves up for failure in the years ahead. And so I think, again, that's one of the real reasons I think youth empowerment ought to be something that we're not just doing for young people. It's not a little gift that we're giving to young people. It's one that's good for everyone. And I would go again to something that's already come up, which is not treating education and relieving debt as a gift that we give, right? We treat all the things, debt relief, forgiveness, as if young people have done something wrong, as if they going into the confessional asking for to be forgiven. You went to college. Oh my gosh.
How dare you?
You terrible person. And so why don't we think about that as an investment in the future generation? Young people think about it that way. And if they could vote, we would pay it forward for every generation. This is something that we'd set every generation. Why should you start life in the red? I remember the year before I went to law school. It was a short little story, but it's really indicative. I was working in England. I took a year off because I wasn't sure law school was going to be right. I went, and I was working construction on a 16th century farmhouse. One day I was outside working with the builder, putting in some bricks. He was going to teach me kind of some pointing work. And he said, "Hey, I heard you're going off to law school. You're going to Harvard. How much is that going to cost?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. It's $50,000 a year or something like that." He was like, "How are you going to pay for that?" I was like, "Loans." And he's like, "You should not do that. You should not do that. Adam, I'm telling you, in life, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. You could have a death in the family. You could get someone pregnant. You could, lots of things happen to young guys like you all the time. Don't go to, no one had ever said, don't go to law school. Don't go to Harvard Law School. That's a stupid idea. But at that moment, I thought, oh, he just doesn't understand. But now as an educator, I'm like, I totally get it. Every term I have students who something happens to them. And those law school loans, they don't go away. That debt is with you forever. Forever. And so I think, again, the economic story is this is the path, lower the voting age, this is the pathway to an economically strong United States of America. And so I think we need, when we talk about this isn't like a nice thing we're doing for 16 and 17-year-olds. This is good policy for everyone and necessary policy.
Can I hop in real quick?
Of course you can.
Thank you. I wanted to, does anyone know the term life negative or like life positive? That I'm taking a philosophy course this semester, so we're learning about like different ideologies as you do in philosophy. And one of the ones that stuck out was life negative. And westernized culture is a life negative culture. So, and when I learned about it, I'm gonna get in the definition, but I'm gonna give some backstory first. I was sitting in class, and I was, as my professor was going through it, I'm like, wait, yeah, like this kind of lines up with a lot of the things that are going on right now. And so, to give you the context, life negative is the idea that humans are, there's a lot of pillaging, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of gore, and that's the state we're in. That's the state we're in as a country, as a world. And when my professor said, he was like, and that's the world you're living in, a life negative world. And I kind of sat there, and it sat with me for a really long time. Like, I think we learned about this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, y'all, and I've still been sitting up at night like, wait, this is the world we live in. And to tie it into the conversation is that's not the world that kids think about. When you talk to a kid, the thing they're gonna tell you about is, oh yeah, like my favorite superhero is this, or like my favorite cartoon is that. They get really excited about the things they're excited about, and they expect whoever they're talking to get excited about that as well. And I think if we cultivate an environment where it promotes that more than just, oh, that's my favorite superhero too, and then you move on. I think like giving kids that choice, or giving kids that ear to just hear them. And like, we get complacent as adults. We get complacent in what's going on. I've talked to my dad before, and he's like, that's just the way the world is. It is what it is. We all hear that, and we've all heard that before. And it doesn't have to be that. It can be so much better if we give these children the opportunity to make it better. Like, we are, like, kids, and I can't say any more kids. Like, you know, I know y'all looking at me like you're a kid, but like, the people after me, like, I want to be able to give them a world that hears them and listens to them, uplifts them. It doesn't have to be, it is what it is. Hearing that, even at everyone's age now, hearing it is what it is. If you're going through the worst day of your life and you hear it is what it is, does it make it better? Doesn't, no, right, at all, because it doesn't make it better for me, because it's just, yeah, like, you just, like, these kids are, they're telling us, they're giving us the key to success. And not us, because I feel like if y'all are in the room, y'all are kind of with what's going on. But the people outside of this room, they're not hearing the kids. They're not uplifting these kids. They're just, oh, you're a kid, you know? Again, that's another one. Y'all ever heard that before? You're just a kid. You know, you don't really have you don't know what's going on in the world. But they do. They do. They may not be on the, you know, very forefront of their minds, but who wants to think about what's going on in this world all the time? When you become an adult, you have to, because that's adulthood, is knowing what's going on around you and stuff like that. But as a kid, you get to really just be in the things you like all the time, or like, you know, in your mind, because, yeah. But I really do think that realizing that the kids they're in this state of happiness, and like, they haven't been put in the position to be complacent yet. They're new here. So everything they see is for the first, or a lot of the things they see is for the first time. And I think realizing their joy and uplifting their joy can do so much, can do a lot more than people think it can. And I think it can get us out of this not quote unquote, because it's really life negative, but I think it can get us out of this life negative mindset and culture that we've found ourselves in.
Thank you, Troy. I mean, that's the closing right there. Mic drop. Thank you, Troy, for offering that important perspective. choice and agency, but also inviting them to the table, centering the voices, and providing the structure for them to thrive and be successful in their own thoughts and ideas and the implementation of that. Because I don't want to ignore the fact, too, that while children are growing up, there are things that they have to learn, but how we partner with them is providing them with what we have and joining together. So you have this wonderful idea, I have this structure and resources, and this is how I'm gonna guide you along the way in leading and doing, without hovering, because I think that happens sometimes too, when we engage with our youth and young adults, and when we have these conversations, it's like, here you go, I hear you, I'm listening to you, but I have to be on your neck every few seconds. And it's like, that's not really autonomy and agency, right? And like, who gets the credit for it? Because at the end of the day, another problem that happens is we have our youth and young adults doing the work, but they're not the people that we're seeing in the pictures. They're not the people that we see giving the speeches. They're not the people we see sitting on this panel, if I can be quite honest, yes, right? And so thinking about how that works within what we do, I believe she said it earlier, while the intentions are well and good, right? What does it actually look like? Like, what are we seeing, and what's the iteration of that? And so my last question for all of you, and my hope is that in light of the conversation that we're having, that Troy, you can be the last voice, is we all know that lowering the voting age is something that won't happen overnight. What would each of you say the call to action is for the audience here today? And, you know, Troy, as you mentioned earlier, you decided to let us know how old we are in comparison to you. However, I do want Troy to end us and close us out, because we need to, if we're gonna talk about uplifting the voices of our youth and young adults, we gotta do it. And so, anyone can take us away, and Troy, you're gonna close us out.
Or you go, like, well, you go last, yeah?
Yeah. Mhm. Yep.
I'll go
Oh,
first.
go ahead,
Sure.
okay.
Probably the oldest guy up here. I'm 44. Can you believe it? Look at this elderly man up on
Adam,
up
you
on
don't
stage
look
here.
a day over 18.
So the call to action, I think, for everyone in this room, is to believe. Believe this is possible. And I think it's hard to imagine, but I see this as unfinished civil rights work. This is just we didn't finish it, and this is entirely realistic. And I believe this is one of the things that I am going to see in my lifetime is a lowering of the voting age. I am certain of it, because I know the truth, which is that the facts, the arguments all line up. So the second thing that I think is a call to action, and this is something that I've been encouraging people to think about, is I actually think, you know, we've been talking about youth disengagement, disillusionment, but I actually look at America, and I talk to kids, and I actually see a lot of political engagement. And maybe not as like, you know, who's running for Congress in my district, but there are people who are deeply concerned with police brutality, who are all ready to march in the streets after the next, you know, gun shooting in a school happens. And what I encourage young people to do the next time, and the next time is this week, it's next week, is when you're going out to march, think about marching for the right to vote. Not marching to try to get members of Congress, adults, to change those gun laws and to enact those climate change regulations. For your own power march. And don't ask, demand. This is your human right to have a voice over your leaders. And so think about that. Again, I'm not here to tell you exactly what to do. I'm here to put that little spark in your head to say, is that what you want? What do you think the pathway is? I believe you have a right. Do you believe it too?
Yay and amen to everything you shared there. couple things. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, as we all know, gave a number of speeches. One of the ones that he gave that shapes how I think we might envision a call to action was a short speech called All Here Now. And the idea is that we don't want just a few of our rights, we want all of our rights. We don't want them at some other place, we want them right here in our communities, and we don't want them at a later point in the future, we want it now. I think it's important as those who are, to your great point about age, allies, accomplices alongside young people to support their self-advocacy for all of their rights right here at this very present moment. Meaning, yes, it's important for young people to have the right to vote at 16. It's also important for young people to have the right to serve on school boards. It's also important for young people to have the right to serve on boards of elections. Right now, Michigan is the only state where I believe 16 and 17-year-olds can serve on boards of elections. It's also important for young people to view themselves, and for adults to tell the truth that voting, though important, is insufficient by itself to shift policy. Public assemblies, prayer vigils, petition signatures, knocking on doors, as you called us to, the full continuum of informed civic participation is how we shift some of this policy in the direction of our dreams and translating human rights into civil rights. So supporting the full menu of children's rights here and now will help us get to where we want to go.
Agreed. I think the call to action that I would ask everybody is, how can we go from civics education to civic action, right? That is a part of our A through G requirements, right? Folks have to take some form of civics class, econ class, understanding the government, understanding how these things work. But it's not just enough to understand that. We need to make sure that we are galvanizing our young people to take that action that is so necessarily needed, right? As we are working to lower the voting age, how are we preparing our young people to vote, to participate? You were talking about project-based learning, right? That is some of the things that folks should be doing. Civic engagement isn't just voting on election day. It's 365 days of the year, making sure that folks are aware about what's happening. I've been talking with educators, I've been talking with advisors about how are ways that they can set up simulations in their classroom, right? Every young person in that high school, in that middle school, in that elementary school, actually participating in voting on election day and comparing that against the actual national turnout, right? What does that look like in comparison so that you are building that culture of participation? And I think as we do our advocacy work, as we work to change, and I really appreciate that you brought up what's happening in Berkeley and Oakland. I used to be a teacher in San Francisco, and was part of some of those efforts to really lower the voting age. And to hear the development there is phenomenal, but that came from young people. That came from students demanding more, right? If you know anything about Berkeley High School, the first African American Studies program in the nation in a high school, right, was in Berkeley High. There was a lot of activism that came from the young people demanding more. And so the more that we provide that access, that opportunity for young people to participate, the better that we'll see our future.
And before I get into my spiel, thank you all again for having me and giving me a space to advocate for young people. Like I said, I'm 22 now, so I'm not a kid anymore, but y'all are really helping to heal an inner child, and I appreciate that. And so the two things that I have, one is the gift of gab. Start talking to people, even if it's just an introduction to, hey, you think that we should lower the voting age? And if they're like, why do you think that? You start, you get on your soapbox, and you let them know, because, words can go so far. Just now, y'all even lending an ear to everyone up here, it goes so far, and it does so much. Waves happen, they don't happen overnight, but they happen through time, conversations that are had. And then my second thing is just understanding that a lot of young people are being pushed to the forefront and on the front lines of the issues that we're dealing with. A prime example is I'm going back to the greatest homecoming on earth, y'all, North Carolina A&T, just letting y'all know. But
dangerous territory.
Right, no, for real. But with it being the greatest homecoming on earth, I'm scared to go back and like a peer could be shot, like gun violence, something. One of the darkest things that has overclouded our homecoming is, oh, someone's gonna die, and 9 times out of 10, it's not gonna be the alumni that are flying in for the 2 days. It's gonna be one of the undergrad students that are just having a good time and trying to enjoy their youth, you know? And like when I say we're being forced to the forefront, yeah, some of my colleagues don't want to have to fight for the things they're fighting for, but they're doing it. They're doing it because they know that at the end of the day, we're not gonna be in this young phase forever. One day we're gonna have to pass it off to somebody else. And with all this being said, the conversation that was had today, I just want y'all to understand that young people are we're fighting, we're screaming at the top of our lungs. We were given a world that we somehow were just like, you know, it's in shambles, but y'all gotta deal with it, you know? Like I've had older people tell me like, yeah, you know, global warming's not that serious. Yeah, it's not that serious to you because in 20 years it's not gonna matter to you. You're not gonna.
I mean,
like it's. And hey, bluntness at this point, that climate change, gun violence, all that stuff, young people are the ones that are being victims. Yeah. We are the victims. And so with everything, like I said, being said today, just understand young people aren't just kids. It is what it is because it's so much more. Young people have to pass it off to young people eventually, you know? And I hope if y'all take anything from this, it's that we're trying. We are trying, and we're fighting. So, and I guess that's my spiel, y'all. Thank you.
thank you everyone so much for this wonderful discussion. And thank you, Troy, for closing us out to have something to really, really think about. The theme that I heard you say is young people are facing very adult decisions.
And we are.
In different ways. And we're screaming out for help because you're asking us as young adults and youth to face and be the problem fixers for these very adult situations. Anyway, that was a wonderful discussion. Thank you again to our panel. Let's give them a round of applause. And because I taught first graders, I am very literal. Let's give them a round of applause. And it's like a little exercise stretch break because we have been sitting for a wonderful time. And so I believe the next thing is lunch. Period. You the one.
So I was one of those people that was skeptical, and y'all might won me over, but I do have questions. So the first one is you said 9, then you said 11, right? And you've been saying 16 and 17. Do y'all have a consensus on the age we're talking?
So I will answer that because I think I was introducing younger ages. And that is because I think ultimately, it makes sense for everyone, one person, one vote, to be the law of the land. And I think, to me, the system that I would love to see is one where everyone gets a vote. And when you're a little baby, right, that's exercised through your guardian. Ooh, excuse me. That's when you're a little baby, right? That's exercised by your guardian. That proxy vote, right, is exercised. For some people, it'll be a parent. For other people, it might be a grandma or someone like that. And I think when you transition is when you're ready to transition, right? So my 9-year-old daughter, she would love to be on this stage and offering the youngest of all perspectives. And she and I see eye to eye on a lot of things, but not on everything. And I think she would be in a position at age 9 to go and actually fill out the form. She can write, she can do all the things. And when you feel ready to exercise that vote, you go ahead and do that. Just like we say to octogenarians and anyone else, like if you feel up to, you go and vote. Now, I think that's a long-term solution. Around the world, we do not have that model yet. It's been actually introduced, this type of voting system has been introduced, but I don't think we're there yet. And that's why I really embrace efforts to lower the voting age to 16. That is something where there are models around the world. There are a whole bunch of countries all over the world where 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can vote. There are jurisdictions in the United States. In fact, in a jurisdiction in Vermont, they just not only lowered the voting age to 16, but also allowed 16 and 17-year-olds to run for the highest offices in that municipality. And so to me, I have my grand vision, but I also am a practical person. And I'm like, you know what? Allowing 16 and 17-year-olds is a great start. And once we do that, what do I think's next is, how about those 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds? So that's my take. But I think, again, there's probably diversity on this panel. And I think this is a big tent issue. You listen, you decide what you think is most realistic, and let's all work together on it.
Okay. Oh, sorry, y'all. So we're going to work on ways to continue this dialogue. We got to go.
Okay. But,
In the same light as the gala, we got to go.
I'm interested in that. I won't just speak for myself, but you all, email, right? This is about networking, building a community around this. We're always happy to answer questions for you.
Sorry, we knew this would happen in this session. So we weren't prepared, but we knew this would happen. If we could get everybody upstairs for lunch now, and just so you know, it's going to flow a little differently than yesterday because we do have a speaker, which we're really excited about. So if you guys could head upstairs and find seats at your tables, and then we'll go ahead and get started with that program. But I believe a lot of our panelists are hanging around if you have questions and things for them throughout the rest of the day. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Are you